Give them quiet minds and hearts that they may hear thy voice. Help them to know when to speak, when to be silent. Give them strength to oppose the wrong and uphold the right. And grant that they have a good conscience and soul at peace with thee and with one another. Amen.
As is customary in this chamber, we always stand for a moment of silence to honor those men and women who are serving both home and abroad to protect our freedoms, our first responders, and those that have given the ultimate sacrifice. Moment of silence, please. Thank you. Please be seated. Hey, come on.
Dave, you're not going to get up and speak for an hour, are you?
I'm just gonna get this. No, I think we're good.
Mrs. Dundry? Mr. Mollis? Here. Mrs. Panos? Here. Mr. Rosencrantz?
Here.
President Cahill?
Here.
Who did I miss? Mr. Green?
Here.
6 present.
6 present, we have a quorum. We'll get into the meeting. I'm just going to go over the agenda because the special meeting is a little bit different. We had the salute to the flag and the roll call. I'm going to read a statement, which is the purpose of the meeting tonight. We'll have a public participation element. We'll also go to council if they want to speak about anything. We'll do resolutions. We have an ordinance for first reading, the second reading of which would be on the August 7th meeting. And then we have the adoption, which is the second reading, which is really the purpose of this meeting tonight, and we'll have an adjournment. So I'll read the statement. The sunshine notice, special meeting of the Township Council, special meeting of the Township Council. The Township Council of the Township of Old Bridge will hold a special meeting on Thursday, July 20th, 2017, for the purpose of adoption of resolution authorizing the execution of developers agreement by and between the Township of Old Bridge and CEP Old Bridge LLC, introduction, first reading, of an ordinance amending the zoning map of the Township of Old Bridge in accordance with Chapter 250 of the Code of the Township of Old Bridge, specifically 250-35 entitled Zoning Map, and adoption, second reading of ordinance 2017-16, an ordinance of the Township of Old Bridge amending 250-66 of the Township Code and amending certain sections of ordinances 2016-20, 2016-21, 2016-22, 2016-23, and 2016-24, which previously amended Chapter 250 of the Code of the Township of Old Bridge entitled Old Bridge Township Land Development Ordinance.
Mr. President, I just want to note also that the meeting is being held in conformity to the Open Public Meeting Act. Notice was given to the newspapers, and notice the meeting was also posted in public places, so that's in conformance with the Open Public Meetings Act.
Thank you. This is the public participation. Does anybody want to speak from the public? Mark? Just name and address. Thank you.
First question, why is there a special meeting?
Can I answer that?
Sure, absolutely.
Basically, the reason why there were 2 special meetings, because the township entered into a settlement with respect to its affordable housing obligation. And as a result of that, there was an order entered by the court pertaining to certain time restrictions in which we had to meet. Those time restrictions required the township to adopt a particular ordinance that dealt with certain amendments to ordinances that were previously adopted that were requested by the special master, and the timeline by which that was to occur required us to do the special meetings. One of the interveners in the matter had filed a motion to seek litigants' rights, that being Avalon Bay, in which ultimately their position had been is that the town had received compliance, its approval by the court of its affordable housing plan, and those deadlines were set forth at that hearing back on April 3rd. And ultimately, according to that, the order and what was stated at that hearing, the ordinances were actually initially supposed to be in place by mid-July, and because of certain the unavailability of certain members, we couldn't get a quorum, so the need to have the special meetings was caused by the fact that we're under court order to do so.
So what you're saying,
No, I said what I said.
because certain not available, you have a special meeting because the members that
No.
were here may have voted against it.
That's not what I said.
That's exactly what.
No,
you
I
said.
didn't say. I said that we could, no, I didn't say,
Certain members weren't available.
no, don't put words in my
Well,
mouth.
we'll go back to the videotape.
Go back to videotape. The fact of the matter is that we had to have the ordinance adopted, and by a certain time frame. So now's the time frame in which we have to have adopted, and it's being adopted.
I have quite concerns when 4 of these members are lame duck members of the council. We know that 4 of them are gonna be replaced, and it just happens they're the 4 that are here voting on this. This is terrible. This is not right. This is not right for the township. 5 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. Every one of these things have been like secretive or hiding behind something.
Actually, Mr. Merwin, nothing could be further from the truth. You're going to sit here and bloviate, because that's what you do, is bloviate. No, I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to sit here and listen to you bloviate. No, I'm not, because frankly, that's not what occurred. There were public hearings. There were multiple public hearings. Nothing was done in secret. There was no.
6 o'clock on a
No,
Friday,
I don't think
an
so.
hour after the Jewish holiday.
Right.
The other one-
Everything was, there was plenty of discussion, plenty of opportunity. We're not going to stop.
None of these.
Right.
Now, the second one, excuse me, let me turn this over. All right, sorry. The one about the consent agenda, will there be a discussion on that on a consent agenda, or do we have to talk about it now?
There's no consent agenda.
The resolution?
The resolution, you
Yeah,
mean?
and the reason why
no,
this agenda is being filed, because of special meeting, you have to publish your agenda. So the agenda was published, so that's what's been put out, so that's why we're following the agenda.
So just, you can speak about everyone.
And I can get a copy of that order that said these timelines, right?
Sure.
Okay, very good. But do we discuss the resolution now, or wait until?
You can discuss it now. This is the only public portion piece of the meeting right
Why
now.
is this one on a special meeting?
Well, for the resolution of the developers agreement, because this particular developer has again, asked because they have a closing by the end of July. Our next council meeting is until August, so it wouldn't be approved in time. So as an accommodation, which they received approval, they had asked if it could be put on for approval, since it's a developers agreement that's done in ordinary course.
And when is the town agreeing to?
Well, again, developers' agreements are pretty typical, and it's a condition of the approval that they received. And in it basically, it's not what the town's agreeing to, it's the fact that it memorializes contractually certain improvements that the developer has to do to this particular site, and including certain escrows that have to be posted, certain fees that have to be posted, and to the extent that they fail to comply with those, this is a mechanism by which the township is enabled to enforce it.
All right, I mean, because the project, though, it sounds great that we're getting a solar farm.
Right.
Today, we get $1 worth of taxes. When it's built out next month, we get $1 worth of taxes. There's really not a whole lot that the town gets, unless we're gonna get a lot of improvements. There is no, you're not getting any tax on these solar things.
Oh, yes, you do.
Not according to your tax assessor.
They're,
Maybe on a building, but not on the,
you change, there's improvements that get included. The land's not going to be taxed the same amount as it was before it was done. And again, it's a condition of their approval, so this is nothing out of the ordinary. We've approved, this council has approved multiple developers' agreements. As a matter of fact, previous to this administration, on many occasions, developers' agreements were not even required as a condition of approval. And as a result, what happens is that if a developer doesn't comply with, let's say you have an approval and they don't comply with it, then you have to try to do resolution compliance enforcement, which is a lot more difficult. When you have an agreement in place, it gives you a vehicle by which you can enforce many additional terms that you would not ordinarily be able to do.
do you happen to know what improvements we'll be getting from this project?
It's a solar field, right?
But what improvements will the town be getting? It's a solar field
Right.
also next to a grammar school, so.
Right.
Before we pat ourselves on the
And in my understanding, it's a brownfield site next to a grammar school as well. Well, that's what the resolution said, and I can only look at the reports. Again, this council didn't approve it, the zoning board approved it.
How about one more question there, because we're going over the 5 minutes and it's been back and forth. Okay, thank you. Anybody else from the public want to be heard? I will close the public portion. Move on to the resolution. This is the first reading?
No, it's,
No,
you're gonna be
it's a resolution. Yeah,
adopt the
sorry.
resolution.
Resolution authorizing, I'm sorry, does anybody want to comment? Any council member comments?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Your mic.
I just want to point out that the question was raised about what the township is getting out of the solar farm. The engineer for the MUA is very happy about it because he's getting a sewer line, which will connect to the development that's over there. So that's a positive for the township. That's part of the agreement that was made last night by the MUA.
Well, it's part of their approval, and their approvals included in the agreement. They have, part of the agreement, they have to comply with with everything that they have to do as part of outside agency approvals.
The other thing, the developer who wants this pushed up because they have a closing, is that Avalon Bay? Or is that another?
No, this is CP Old Bridge, and,
Oh,
right,
okay.
their closing's at the end of the month.
I want to mention Avalon Bay. They filed suit for developer's remedy, and it's something that we discussed, and we said that this could happen if we voted no for the changes in the zoning. Avalon Bay filed suit,
Well, they filed a motion to enforce
motion,
litigants' rights.
whatever, I don't know the legal technicalities, but they filed something. And it just was, just as an example of what would have happened if we had voted no to zoning changes, I believe, right?
Yeah, right. Again, I've had multiple discussions, and there's been multiple public hearings at multiple different times, and, so there was nothing secret. And at the end of the day, I can tell you what's lining up around the state. To the extent we hadn't settled, and the fact that we didn't adopt the ordinances, we would be vulnerable to a developer's remedy litigation, and in our instance, we had multiple interveners. So yes, we would be susceptible. And I know people made, there were statements made about, South Brunswick was fighting their case. Well, in fact, what South Brunswick did was that, they had a case in front of Judge Wolfson. They had a trial, they lost their trial. And as a result of them fighting, so to speak, they basically ended up with many, hundreds more units than they normally probably would have had if they agreed to settle. What they then tried to do was they filed a motion to try to say that Judge Wolfson had a conflict and he should not have heard the case. Well, Judge Hurd last week heard that case. Judge Hurd, HURD, down in Mercer County, ruled on that motion, and he ruled against South Brunswick. He said, no, the judge didn't have a conflict, so in fact, the judge's ruling stands. So right now, it's interesting. There's one decision out there that establishes methodology, and that's Judge Wolfson's, because his case, the decision still exists, and unless it's appealed, and I'm sure it may be appealed by South Brunswick, but if you take that case on its face, and you take the methodology that Judge Wolfson utilized in that case and applied it here, I can tell you that our requirement would be at the 1,000-unit cap. We wouldn't be where we are now. And there was a methodology trial conducted down in Mercer County. Again, I said this before. That trial was conducted, and the Judge Jacobson hasn't rendered a decision. And again, she'll be determining methodology. It's not a question. There is no question whether or not you have to provide affordable housing. That issue's been resolved a long time ago. You have to do it. The question is, again, I've said, is how much. And at the end of the day, I can assure you that to the extent that a methodology is determined, and the way our settlement agreement is, in the event it happens to be more, we don't have to provide more. But if it's less, we can go in and get our obligation modified. And towns who have settled later with fair share housing, what Fair Share Housing is now putting in their settlement agreements, not only are they receiving attorney's fees from municipalities, which we did not have to pay, they're also requiring that before you can go in and seek a reduction of your obligation, there has to be a certain spread. I mean, it has to be more than 10% or more than 15%. We don't have that obligation either. So if at some point in the future, a court determines a methodology, and by that methodology, then our obligation is decreased, we can go back into court to seek a reduction. So, we're protected on all sides. And again, the litigation stopped And as I've said, and anyone who looks at this on a reasonable, rational and a method of eyes would recognize that this is a good thing for the township, and it's a good settlement for the township. And you know, many professionals who have seen our settlement have all agreed and concurred with that.
Mr. Green, you finished?
Yes, I'm done, yeah, thank you.
Any other comments from council? Okay, move on to the resolution.
I just want to note the resolution, the agreement, there was an agreement in your package. It was slightly modified by me, but it was more stylistic changes, nothing substantive, grammatical changes, things like that, but substantively, it's the same. I just want to note that.
Great. So I need a motion, I'll read the resolution. Resolution authorizing the execution of a developers agreement by and between the Township of Old Bridge and CEP Old Bridge LLC. Can I get a motion, please?
I'll move it.
Moved by Mr. Green, can I have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Rosencrantz, roll call on the resolution.
Mrs. Dungy?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Mollis?
Yes.
Mrs. Panos?
Left dais.
President Kale. Mr. Rosencrantz?
Yes.
President Kale.
Yes.
5 yes.
Yes. Okay, ordinance for first reading is an introduction. An ordinance amending the zoning map of the Township of Old Bridge in accordance with Chapter 250 of the Code of the Township of Old Bridge, specifically 250-35 entitled zoning map. Can I have a motion, please?
Move it.
Rosencrantz, I have a second.
Second.
Second, Mrs. Panos, roll call on the introduction.
If you don't mind, can I have the attorneys explain this briefly?
Sure.
Sure.
There was a memo also that you all should receive from our new township planner, Catherine O'Kane, who's our township resident as well, who helped with the provision of the zoning map. And as you'll see that, basically what this zoning map will do is now that once the ordinances got adopted as part of the affordable housing matter, those zones were changed, so this zoning map is going to reflect those changes, because that's what you're supposed to do. And then if you note, there were 2 redevelopment areas that go back to 2004. Apparently, there was a typographical error in the resolution designated the areas that needed redevelopment that didn't follow the ordinances, and then the map also includes revisions to the typographical error to make those redevelopment errors consistent. So again, it's typical that once you change a zone by ordinance, that you then have to update the map, so the map reflects the ordinance.
Please.
That's the ordinance that originally had, they planned to have a golf course.
Which one, the Rose and Lamberton?
Rose Farm
Okay.
and the Lamberton Farm.
All right.
White Horse.
But that was something that Katie had picked up, and so because we're doing it now, it made sense to include those changes as well. And again, the public hearing for this will be at the August 7th, 2017 meeting.
Any other questions at this first reading? Any questions from council? I have a motion and a second.
Yes.
Roll call, please, on first reading introduction.
Mrs. Dungy?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Mollis?
Yes.
Mrs. Panos?
Yes.
Mr. Rosencrantz?
Yes.
President Kale.
Yes.
6 yes.
Move on to second reading, adoption. Ordinance number 2017-16, an ordinance of the Township of Old Bridge amending 250-66 of the Township Code and amending certain sections of ordinances 2016-20, 2016-21, 2016-22, 2016-23, and 2016-24, which previously amended Chapter 250 of the Code of the Township of Old Bridge entitled Old Bridge Township Land Development Ordinance. Do we need any discussion on this? Can I get a motion?
I move it.
Moved by Mrs. Panos, can I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Mollis, roll call,
Yeah,
please.
public hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Anybody from the public want to be heard on this, on the adoption? Close the public portion.
Mrs. Dungy?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Mollis?
Yes.
Mrs. Panos?
Yes.
Mr. Rosencrantz?
Yes.
President Kale.
Yes.
6
Motion to adjourn.
Move it.
Moved by Mr. Green, have a second. Second by
I
Mrs.
second
Dungy.
that.
Roll call, please, on the adjournment.
Mrs. Dungy?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Mollis? Mr.
Yes.
Mollis? Mrs.
Yes.
Panos?
Daddy moves.
Mrs. Panos?
Yes, yes.
Mr. Rosencrantz?
Yep.
President Kale.
Yes.
6 yes.
We are adjourned.